There are men who build empires. There are men who inspire fear. And then there are men whose names become legends, spoken only in whispers, even decades after they seize power. Don Alessandro Moretti was one of those men. Across Italy, people knew him as a billionaire businessman whose companies built luxury hotels, restored historic landmarks, and controlled one of the largest shipping networks in Europe. His charitable foundation donated millions to hospitals, schools, and disaster relief. He appeared at galas beside presidents, cardinals, and celebrities. To the world, he was a respected philanthropist. Behind closed doors, however, Alessandro ruled an empire that had never appeared on a balance sheet. Politicians sought his favor before elections. Judges carefully measured every decision involving his businesses. Crime syndicates from Naples to Sicily preferred negotiation over conflict whenever the Moretti name entered the conversation. He never needed to threaten anyone. His reputation had already done that for him. At 63 years old, Alessandro possessed everything most men could only dream of: power, influence, wealth beyond imagination. Yet every evening, as the sun disappeared beneath the Ligurian Sea, he became just another grieving father. Hidden beneath the eastern wing of his cliffside mansion was a small private room known only to him. It wasn't luxurious. There were no priceless paintings or expensive furniture, only a wooden chair, a single candle, and a glass display case. Inside that case rested 3 simple objects: a faded blue ribbon, a silver necklace shaped like a tiny flower, and a family photograph that had begun to yellow with age. The picture had been taken 30 years earlier beside Lake Como. His wife, Sophia, laughed as the wind played with her dark hair. Standing between them was their 6-year-old daughter, Lucia, smiling proudly with a blue ribbon tied neatly in her hair. It was the last photograph they ever took together. 3 weeks later, Sophia was murdered when gunmen ambushed the family convoy on a rain-soaked mountain road. During the chaos, Lucia disappeared. Some believed she had been kidnapped. Others insisted she had died alongside her mother. Search parties combed forests for weeks. Police investigated every lead. Private detectives traveled across Europe. Nothing. No witnesses. No ransom demands. No body. No answers. Eventually, the authorities declared Lucia legally dead. Friends urged Alessandro to accept the truth. He never did. Instead, he buried himself in work. He expanded his businesses across Europe. He negotiated billion-dollar deals. He built an organization so powerful that even his enemies admitted he was untouchable. But success never silenced the questions that haunted him. What happened to Lucia? Did she suffer? Did she call for him? Could he have saved her? Those questions followed him every day for nearly 3 decades. Not even Renato De Luca, the loyal advisor who had stood beside Alessandro since childhood, could ease his burden. Neither could Matteo Ferraro, the former military commander entrusted with protecting the estate, nor Giulia Conti, the brilliant strategist who managed the family's legitimate financial empire. Each had seen the Don command boardrooms with absolute confidence. Each had watched him negotiate with dangerous men without showing fear. But every evening, when he stood alone before that glass display case, they saw something else. A father who had never stopped waiting. The morning everything changed began like every other. The sea was calm. Gardeners trimmed hedges beneath a clear blue sky. Kitchen staff prepared breakfast while security teams completed their routine patrols. Nothing seemed unusual, until the housekeeper unlocked the mansion's front door. Lying neatly on the polished marble steps was a cream-colored envelope. No stamp, no return address, no fingerprints, only 7 handwritten words. For Don Alessandro Moretti, open alone. The envelope should never have been there. The estate was protected by 12-foot stone walls. Motion sensors covered every approach. Thermal cameras monitored the grounds day and night. Former Special Forces operators guarded every entrance. Even birds occasionally triggered the security system. Yet no alarm had sounded. The surveillance footage showed no visitor, no vehicle, no drone, nothing. It was as though the envelope had simply appeared. Head of security Matteo Ferraro personally supervised every inspection. Bomb specialists scanned it. Chemical tests found no poison. X-ray imaging revealed no hidden devices. According to every expert, it was an ordinary envelope. And yet, nothing about it felt ordinary. At exactly 9:17 a.m., Matteo carried it into Alessandro's private office. The Don barely looked up from the documents covering his desk. Anything dangerous? No. Who delivered it? We don't know. Alessandro sighed and reached for the envelope. His silver letter opener sliced cleanly through the seal. A single photograph slid onto the polished walnut desk. He glanced at it, then froze. The silver letter opener slipped from his fingers and struck the marble floor with a sharp metallic crack. For the first time in over 30 years, the most feared man in Italy forgot how to breathe. The woman in the photograph looked to be in her mid-30s. She stood beside a quiet mountain lake, smiling softly at the camera. Around her wrist was a faded blue ribbon, the same ribbon his daughter had worn on the day she disappeared. His hands began to tremble. Slowly, he turned the photograph over. Written in elegant black ink were 7 words that shattered everything he believed about the past. She has been waiting for you to remember. In that single moment, Don Alessandro Moretti realized one terrifying possibility. If the photograph was genuine, then his daughter had not died 30 years ago. Someone had stolen her from him, and someone else had waited 3 decades to tell him the truth. The silver letter opener lay on the marble floor. No one dared pick it up. Don Alessandro Moretti remained motionless behind his desk, his eyes locked on the photograph as though the world around him had ceased to exist. Outside his office, life continued as usual. Staff members crossed the marble halls carrying documents and trays of coffee. Security officers changed shifts. Gardeners trimmed hedges overlooking the Ligurian Sea. Inside the office, time had stopped. Matteo Ferraro, the head of security, studied Alessandro carefully. In 16 years of service, he had watched the Don negotiate billion-euro contracts, survive assassination attempts, and stare down men who had built reputations on violence. He had never seen him afraid, until now. After nearly a full minute, Alessandro finally spoke. Close the door. Matteo quietly locked the heavy walnut doors. No interruptions. Yes, Don. Alessandro continued staring at the photograph. Did anyone else see this? No. The housekeeper saw only the envelope. The bomb unit never opened it. Good. His voice remained calm, but Matteo noticed something unusual. The Don's hands were trembling. Alessandro turned the photograph over once more. She has been waiting for you to remember. He whispered the sentence aloud. Remember what? It wasn't written like a threat, nor was it written like a ransom demand. It sounded almost personal, as though the sender believed Alessandro already knew part of the answer. He searched his memory. The day Lucia disappeared. The convoy. The rain. The gunfire. His wife's final scream. Everything after that became a blur of hospitals, funerals, investigations, and years spent chasing dead ends. He had replayed those memories thousands of times. What had he forgotten? He walked toward a tall bookcase at the far end of the office. Hidden behind several leather-bound volumes was a biometric safe. The lock recognized his fingerprint. Inside rested only one item, a thick file labeled in faded black ink. Lucia. Private. He hadn't opened it in 18 years. Dust covered the edges. He carried it back to his desk. Inside were hundreds of pages. Police reports, private investigation notes, maps, photographs, witness statements, receipts from investigators across Europe. Every lead he had ever followed, every failure he had ever endured. He flipped slowly through the pages. Nothing seemed different, until one photograph slipped free and landed on the desk. It showed the family convoy only hours before the attack. 3 vehicles, 6 bodyguards. His wife smiled through the open window. Little Lucia waved toward the photographer. Alessandro had looked at this picture countless times. Yet today, he noticed something he had never seen before. In the background stood a dark sedan parked beside the road. Its headlights were on. No one had ever mentioned that vehicle. No investigator had questioned it. Had it always been there? Or had everyone simply overlooked it? Matteo. Yes, Don? I want every original investigation file brought out of storage. Matteo nodded. All of them? Every single page. The police copies too. What about the digital archive? That as well. Matteo understood immediately. The Don wasn't reopening the investigation. He was beginning it again. By late afternoon, the estate's underground archive had become a maze of open boxes. Giulia Conti arrived carrying a laptop and several portable scanners. I came as soon as Matteo called. Alessandro handed her the old convoy photograph. "What do you see?" She studied it quietly, then enlarged the image. "The sedan. You noticed. It's almost hidden." She enhanced the photograph further. The license plate remained unreadable, but another detail emerged. The driver's window was partially open. Someone inside appeared to be watching the convoy. Julia frowned. "Was this vehicle ever investigated?" Alessandro shook his head. "No, that's impossible," so I thought. For the next 3 hours, Julia compared every photograph taken that day. Eventually, she found another image, the same sedan, different location, still watching. Then another. The same vehicle outside the church where Sophia's funeral was held. Again outside the cemetery. Again outside Alessandro's temporary residence after the attack. The sedan had followed him for days, yet no report mentioned it. Someone had deliberately ignored it, or removed every reference to it. Meanwhile, Matteo questioned every surviving member of Alessandro's old security team. Most had retired years earlier. Some had died. Only one remained alive. 81-year-old Franco Bellini, former convoy commander. He agreed to visit the estate that evening. Franco entered slowly with the aid of a walking cane. Age had bent his back, but his eyes remained sharp. He greeted Alessandro warmly. "It's been too long." "It has." Alessandro placed the convoy photograph before him. Franco smiled sadly. "I remember that day." "So do I." Alessandro pointed toward the sedan. "Do you remember this?" Franco leaned closer. His expression changed instantly. He looked up. "Where did you get this copy?" "My archive." Franco remained silent. "Talk to me." "I thought every photograph showing that car had been destroyed." The room became very quiet. "What do you mean?" Franco sighed heavily. "The police told us it was irrelevant." "Who told you?" "I don't remember his name." "Try. He wasn't a detective. He arrived after the attack. He carried government identification. He collected every photograph. And this one? I kept a duplicate. You never told me?" Franco lowered his head. "I was ordered not to." "By whom?" "I honestly don't know." Matteo and Julia exchanged a glance. For nearly 30 years, someone had controlled the evidence surrounding Lucia's disappearance. The realization chilled everyone in the room. Franco slowly reached inside his coat pocket. "I kept something else." He placed a folded piece of paper on the desk. "I never understood it." Alessandro unfolded it carefully. It was a parking receipt. The location immediately caught Julia's attention. Bella Vista Central Railway Station. Time-stamped. 3 hours after the attack. On the back, written in blue ink, appeared a single word. Locker 128. Franco looked embarrassed. "I found it inside one of the convoy vehicles during the investigation. I thought it belonged to one of the officers. No one ever claimed it, so I kept it." Alessandro stared at the receipt. The railway station had never appeared in any official report, not once. Another forgotten clue. Or another clue someone wanted forgotten. Night had fallen by the time Franco left the estate. The room remained silent. Matteo broke it first. "We should search the station. Tomorrow morning." Alessandro nodded. "No, we go tonight." If someone has been hiding evidence for 30 years, I won't give them another 12 hours. An hour later, Alessandro, Matteo, Julia, and Nico Rinaldi arrived at Bella Vista Central Station. The Grand Terminal looked much as it had decades earlier. Passengers hurried through the main hall beneath enormous iron arches. Announcements echoed overhead. Few people noticed the 4 visitors. Julia located an old floor plan. The original lockers were downstairs. They've been replaced several times. An elderly station supervisor listened patiently as Alessandro explained they were searching for historical records. The man smiled politely. Most of the old lockers were removed years ago. What happened to them? They weren't destroyed. They were transferred into storage. "Where?" The supervisor hesitated. "Follow me." Deep beneath the station, behind a locked maintenance corridor, stood dozens of rusted metal lockers waiting to be recycled. Most had been forced open years ago. One remained locked, its faded number barely visible beneath layers of dust, 128. The old supervisor frowned. "That's strange. No one ever emptied it." Alessandro stepped closer. His heartbeat quickened. Matteo examined the lock. "It hasn't been opened in decades. The supervisor searched through an old cabinet and returned carrying a ring of master keys. On the third attempt, the lock clicked. The heavy metal door slowly creaked open. Inside rested a small brown parcel wrapped in aging paper. Nothing else. No money, no jewelry, no documents visible from the outside. Only a handwritten label. It contained just 3 words: for Alessandro Moretti. The parcel had been waiting there for 30 years. No one moved. The rusted locker door hung open, its hinges groaning softly as if protesting the return of a secret that had been buried for decades. Don Alessandro Moretti stared at the brown parcel resting inside. 30 years. It had survived renovations, management changes, floods, strikes, and countless inspections. Waiting. For him. The station supervisor adjusted his glasses. I've worked here 22 years. I never knew anyone still had property in these old lockers. Alessandro carefully lifted the parcel into his hands. The paper had yellowed with age, but the wrapping remained surprisingly intact. Across the front, written in neat blue ink, were the words, for Alessandro Moretti. No address, no sender, only his name. Matteo Ferraro looked around the storage room. We shouldn't open it here, Alessandro agreed. Let's go. The drive back to the estate was unusually quiet. The parcel rested on the rear seat between Alessandro and Giulia Conti. No one touched it. No one guessed what might be inside. Whatever it contained had remained hidden for 3 decades. A few more minutes wouldn't matter. As they entered the estate, Matteo doubled the security around the mansion. No visitors, no phone calls, no interruptions. Alessandro wanted complete privacy. Inside the private study, the parcel was placed in the center of the desk. Giulia photographed every angle before opening it. If this becomes evidence, we'll need a record of its original condition. Alessandro nodded. He reached for the same silver letter opener that had opened the mysterious envelope 2 days earlier. Carefully, he cut through the aging twine. The paper unfolded slowly. Inside was a weathered cedar box. No lock, no markings, only a faint scent of old wood. Alessandro lifted the lid. 3 objects rested inside: a small cassette tape, a folded letter, and a child's bracelet made of blue woven thread. His breathing caught. He recognized the bracelet immediately. Lucia had made it herself during a summer holiday. She had proudly tied it around his wrist before making another for herself. He had worn his until it eventually broke. She had refused to take hers off. Now it lay inside the box, perfectly preserved. Giulia carefully unfolded the letter. The handwriting was elegant but unfamiliar. She read aloud. If this package has reached you, then I have either failed or I am no longer alive. Your daughter did not die the night your wife was murdered. The room became completely silent. Giulia continued. Someone wanted you to believe she was dead because a living child was far more valuable than a dead one. Matteo slowly looked toward Alessandro. The Don's face remained expressionless. Only his eyes betrayed the storm beneath the surface. The letter continued. Do not trust official records. Do not trust convenient answers. Most importantly, do not assume your enemies are the ones who took her. The final line struck Alessandro harder than everything before it. Sometimes the greatest betrayal comes from those trying to protect you. There was no signature, only a small symbol pressed into the bottom corner. A circle, 4 arrows pointing outward, the same symbol found on Pietro Mancini's silver coin. Matteo immediately placed the letter inside a protective evidence sleeve. The covenant. Giulia nodded slowly. They're connected somehow. But how? No one answered. Instead, Alessandro picked up the cassette tape. Unlike the modern digital recorders used today, it was an old analog cassette labeled only with a handwritten date, the 14th of October, the day after Lucia disappeared. Nico located an old cassette player from the mansion's archive room. Dust covered its speakers. Remarkably, it still worked. Alessandro inserted the tape. For several seconds, only static filled the room. Then a man's voice emerged, calm, measured. I don't know who will hear this recording, but if you're listening, it means I ran out of time. The room fell silent. None of them recognized the voice. I was ordered to destroy every piece of evidence connected to the Moretti case. I didn't. I couldn't. Not after what I saw. The tape crackled. My name doesn't matter. If you know my identity, I'm already dead. I followed the convoy after the attack. I saw the child alive. Alessandro closed his eyes. For 30 years, he had imagined those words. Now he was hearing them, recorded decades earlier. I watched a black sedan leave the scene. It wasn't driven by the men who attacked the convoy. They arrived afterward. They took the girl. They knew exactly where to find her. Another burst of static interrupted the recording. When the voice returned, it sounded weaker. I followed them to Bella Vista Central Station. They switched vehicles inside an underground loading tunnel. I couldn't continue. They discovered I was there. If you're hearing this, remember one name. The recording stopped. The tape reached its end. Matteo immediately rewound it. The final sentence never came. The tape had been cut. Precisely at the moment the name was about to be spoken. For several minutes, no one spoke. Finally, Julia broke the silence. Someone edited it years later. Matteo nodded. They wanted Alessandro to hear enough, but not everything. Alessandro stared at the cassette. It wasn't meant to answer questions. It was meant to send us somewhere. Later that evening, Julia enlarged high-resolution photographs of the bracelet. Something unusual caught her attention. There, she pointed toward the woven threads. Hidden inside the bracelet was a tiny silver bead, too small to notice with the naked eye. Matteo examined it under a magnifying lens. It opens. Using precision tweezers, Julia carefully twisted the bead. A tiny strip of rolled paper slid out. Everyone stared in disbelief. It was hidden all this time. Alessandro carefully unrolled the paper. Only a single address appeared. Via delle Campagne 14. Bella Vista. Nothing else. No explanation. No date. Just an address. The following morning, the four of them drove to the location. Via delle Campagne was one of the oldest streets in Bella Vista. Narrow stone buildings lined both sides. Most dated back centuries. Number 14 stood near the end of the street. A small antique bookshop. Its faded sign read, Benedetti and Sons, rare books and manuscripts. The front door was locked. Dust covered the display windows. A handwritten notice hung behind the glass. Closed indefinitely. Matteo looked around. No movement. Julia examined municipal records on her tablet. The owner was Father Luca Benedetti. Alessandro looked up. The same name from Inspector Vital's notes. Julia nodded. He closed the shop 26 years ago. No forwarding address. No death certificate. No property sale. It's as though he simply disappeared. Nico walked around the rear of the building. Boss, you should see this. Behind the shop stood a neglected courtyard. Overgrown vines covered the walls. Half buried beneath fallen leaves was an old delivery van. Its tires had long since rotted away. The faded company logo remained barely visible. St. Aurelia Monastery. Alessandro looked toward Julia. The monastery again. Every clue now pointed to the same place. The parcel. The recording. Father Luca Benedetti. St. Aurelia. None of it felt accidental. Before they could search further, the bell above the shop door rang. Everyone turned. An elderly woman stood inside the doorway. No one had seen her arrive. She looked directly at Alessandro. I've been waiting a very long time. Matteo instinctively stepped forward. Who are you? The woman ignored the question. Instead, she looked into Alessandro's eyes and quietly said, Your daughter left something here. Then she reached into her coat pocket and produced another cream-colored envelope. This one bore no writing, only a blue ribbon tied neatly around the seal, the same color Lucia had worn on the day she vanished. The elderly woman held the cream-colored envelope with both hands. She did not appear frightened by the four strangers standing before her. Instead, she looked at Don Alessandro Moretti with the quiet confidence of someone who had expected this meeting for years. The blue ribbon tied around the envelope caught Alessandro's attention immediately. It was the same shade Lucia had loved as a child. His voice was calm but strained. You said my daughter left this here. The woman nodded. Many years ago. Matteo Ferraro stepped forward. Who are you? My name is Teresa Bellondi. She smiled faintly. I owned this bookshop with my husband before he passed away. Julia Conti glanced toward the faded sign above the door. Benedetti and Sons? My husband inherited the building from his uncle. Father Luca Benedetti? Teresa nodded. He was my uncle. The name immediately silenced the group. Every clue they had uncovered during the past several days seemed to lead back to Father Luca. Now, for the first time, they had found someone who had actually known him. Teresa invited them inside. The shop smelled of old paper and polished wood. Towering shelves stretched from floor to ceiling, filled with books that had not been touched in years. Dust floated through narrow beams of afternoon sunlight. It felt less like a business and more like a place that had been carefully preserved, as though someone had wanted time itself to stand still. Teresa locked the front door behind them. "I've waited almost 30 years, she said quietly. "Waited for what?" Alessandro asked. "For you." She led them to a small office hidden behind the shop. An old iron stove stood in one corner. Above it hung a framed photograph. Father Luca, younger than expected, standing beside Inspector Carlo Vitale. The two men smiled at the camera. Julia looked surprised. They worked together. "They were friends," Teresa replied. "When the investigation became dangerous, they trusted only each other." She carefully placed the envelope on the table. "I was told never to mail this, never to deliver it, only to hand it to one person." She looked directly at Alessandro. "You." Alessandro untied the faded blue ribbon. Inside lay a folded letter. The handwriting was different from the earlier messages. Smaller, more careful, almost elegant. He unfolded it slowly. "If you are reading this, then Father Luca believed it was finally safe. My name does not matter. What matters is that I was there the night your daughter disappeared." Alessandro's breathing slowed. Everyone remained silent. He continued reading. "Lucia was frightened, but she wasn't injured. She kept asking for her father. She believed you would come." His hands trembled slightly. For 30 years, he had imagined countless terrible possibilities. This simple sentence erased many of them. His daughter had survived the attack, at least that first night. The letter continued. "I couldn't save her myself, but I helped someone who could. If you wish to understand everything, stop searching for who took Lucia. Start searching for who protected her." At the bottom of the page appeared only 2 initials. EM, no name, no date, nothing else. Matteo frowned. "So the envelopes aren't coming from the kidnappers." Julia nodded thoughtfully. "They're coming from someone trying to lead us to the truth." Alessandro folded the letter carefully. "For 3 decades, someone has been keeping promises." Teresa quietly walked toward one of the bookcases. Without saying a word, she pressed against the side panel. A hidden compartment opened. Inside rested a thick leather journal. "I promised Father Luca I'd never show this to anyone. Until you arrived." She placed it gently on the table. Across the cover were burned 2 simple words: visitor log. Unlike Inspector Vitale's notebook, this journal contained no investigative notes. Instead, it listed names, dates, arrival times, departure times. Everyone who had visited Father Luca over nearly 40 years. Most entries meant nothing. Pilgrims, travelers, local families. Then Alessandro reached a page dated 28 years earlier. One name had been written in bold ink: Renato De Luca, his oldest friend, his trusted advisor. His eyes remained fixed on the page. "He came here?" Teresa nodded. "More than once. When?" The first visit was only 3 days after Lucia disappeared. The room fell silent. Matteo slowly looked toward Alessandro. No one spoke. No one wanted to, because every new discovery pointed toward the same unsettling possibility. Renato knew more than he had admitted. "There has to be an explanation," Julia finally said. Alessandro nodded. "There will be." His voice was steady. "But I intend to hear it from Renato himself." As they continued reading the journal, another familiar name appeared: Inspector Carlo Vitale. He had visited Father Luca 17 times over 6 years. The final entry caught Alessandro's attention. October 18th, visitor, unknown woman, child accompanying. No names, no description. Only one additional note: blue ribbon. Alessandro closed the journal. No one needed to explain what that meant. Suddenly, Nico Rinaldi entered from the front of the shop. "Boss, what is it?" "We've got company." Matteo immediately joined him near the front window. A black sedan had stopped across the street. 2 men remained inside. Neither stepped out. Neither looked toward the shop. Yet neither left. Julia quietly observed them. "They're watching us." "How long?" "They arrived about 5 minutes ago." Alessandro looked toward Teresa. "Has anyone else asked about Father Luca recently?" She hesitated. Yes. When? 3 days ago. What did they want? The same thing you wanted. They asked whether anyone had left messages for Don Moretti. Matteo's expression hardened. What did you tell them? The truth. That I had promised to wait. The realization struck Alessandro immediately. Whoever those men worked for, they knew someone had been preserving evidence. They simply arrived too late. Before leaving, Teresa handed Alessandro one final item, a small brass key. There was no note? He asked. She smiled gently. There wasn't one. Father Luca said, when the time came, you would know where it belonged. Alessandro turned the old key over in his hand. Unlike the bank key from Bella Vista, this one carried a small engraving, the same symbol they had seen before. A circle, 4 arrows, the mark of the covenant. Only this key had something else engraved beneath it, a single number, 27. The journey back to the estate was quiet. Each person was lost in thought. Renato had visited Father Luca. Someone had protected Lucia. The mysterious envelopes were guiding, not threatening, them. And now, there was another key, another unanswered question. As the mansion came into view, Matteo's phone rang. He listened for only a few seconds before his expression changed. What happened? Alessandro asked. Matteo lowered the phone slowly. Renato, what about him? He's gone. Gone where? No one knows. He left the estate less than an hour after we did. He didn't tell anyone where he was going. Alessandro looked down at the visitor log resting on his lap, then at the brass key in his hand. For the first time since receiving the mysterious photograph, he wasn't chasing the truth. The truth was already moving toward him. And somewhere beyond the mountains, Renato De Luca had disappeared carrying answers only he could provide. Silence filled the SUV as it climbed the winding coastal road back to the Moretti estate. No one spoke. The leather-bound visitor log rested on Don Alessandro Moretti's lap, open to the page bearing one name, Renato De Luca. 3 visits. The first only days after Lucia disappeared, the last nearly 12 years ago. For more than 30 years, Renato had been more than an advisor. He had been Alessandro's closest friend, the man who stood beside him at his wedding, the man who organized Sophia's funeral, the man who rebuilt the Moretti organization after tragedy nearly destroyed it. If Renato had been hiding something, he had been hiding it for almost half a lifetime. As the estate gates opened, Matteo Ferraro noticed something unusual. 2 security vehicles were parked outside the main entrance. Their emergency lights flashed silently. The atmosphere felt tense. Before Alessandro stepped from the SUV, Matteo's deputy hurried forward. Sir, have you found Renato? The deputy shook his head. No, but we found this. He handed Matteo a sealed envelope. Not cream-colored, white, official. Across the front, written in Renato's unmistakable handwriting, were 4 words. For Alessandro. Alone. The world seemed to stop. Alessandro took the envelope without speaking. He walked directly to his private study and closed the door behind him. For several moments, he simply stared at it. Then he opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter. My brother, if you're reading this, then I've done something that has made you question my loyalty. I understand why. But before you judge me, I ask only one thing. Read every word. Alessandro lowered himself into his chair. Renato had called him my brother since they were 17 years old. He continued reading. The greatest mistake of my life wasn't lying to you. It was believing that the lie would only last a few weeks. Weeks became months. Months became years. Years became decades. Alessandro's grip tightened around the letter. He already knew what was coming, or thought he did. Lucia survived the attack. Those 4 words hit harder than a bullet. Even after all the clues, seeing them written by Renato made them feel real. His daughter had survived. Renato continued. I wasn't the one who found her. Inspector Carlo Vitale was. He contacted me because he no longer trusted anyone inside the official investigation. He believed every move was being watched. Alessandro read on. When I arrived, Lucia was terrified but unharmed. She asked for you constantly. She wanted to go home. His vision blurred. For 30 years, he had imagined his daughter's final moments. Now he learned there had been no final moments. There had only been waiting. The letter continued. Vital believed the people responsible would never stop searching for her. If you publicly continued looking, they would eventually find her. If they believed she had died, they would move on. Alessandro whispered the words aloud. They would move on. Everything suddenly made terrible sense. The funeral, the closed investigation, the disappearance of evidence. None of it had been designed to deceive him alone. It had been designed to deceive everyone. A knock interrupted his thoughts. Don? It was Matteo. Alessandro opened the door. Come in! Julia entered with him. Neither spoke. Alessandro silently handed them Renato's letter. They read it together. When Matteo reached the final page, he looked up. So he didn't betray you? No, Alessandro answered quietly. He sacrificed our friendship to protect Lucia. Julia frowned. Then why disappear now? No one had an answer. Until Alessandro turned the letter over. Something had been written on the back. A map. Simple. Hand-drawn. It showed a mountain road leading to a small chapel overlooking a lake. Beside it appeared 2 words. Come alone. Matteo immediately objected. Absolutely not. It could be a trap. It probably is, Alessandro replied calmly. But Renato wouldn't ask me to come unless he had no other choice. Julia studied the map. The lake. I know it. Alessandro looked at her. It's near St. Aurelia. Everything circled back to the monastery. Before leaving, Alessandro gathered his closest advisors. I want no one following me. Matteo shook his head immediately. I'm ignoring that order. A faint smile crossed Alessandro's face. I expected you would. They compromised. Matteo and Nico would remain out of sight until needed. Julia would coordinate from the estate. If anything happened, they would intervene. Just before sunset, Alessandro reached the abandoned chapel marked on Renato's map. The building overlooked a quiet mountain lake. The water reflected the fading orange sky. For a moment, everything felt strangely familiar. Then he remembered. The photograph. The one delivered inside the first envelope. It had been taken here. His heart began to race. Someone stepped from behind the chapel. Renato. Older. Tired. His usually immaculate suit was covered in dust. For several seconds, neither man spoke. Then Renato smiled sadly. I was wondering how long it would take you to recognize the lake. Alessandro took one slow step forward. You should have told me. I know. You let me mourn my own daughter. I did. And I will regret it until my last breath. Renato reached into his coat. Matteo, watching through binoculars from the hillside, immediately tensed. But Renato wasn't reaching for a weapon. He removed a small leather wallet. Inside was a photograph. Not old. Recent. He handed it to Alessandro. A woman in her mid-30s stood beside a young boy of about 7. She was smiling. Around her wrist, a faded blue ribbon. Alessandro's hands trembled. Lucia, Renato nodded. She calls herself Elena now. She has no idea you're still alive. The words struck Alessandro like lightning. What? I told her you died protecting her. Alessandro stared in disbelief. You lied to her too. Renato closed his eyes. It was the only way to stop her from searching. Before Alessandro could respond, a gunshot echoed across the valley. The bullet struck the stone wall behind Renato. Both men instinctively took cover. A second shot shattered one of the chapel windows. Matteo's voice crackled through Alessandro's hidden earpiece. Sniper! Get down! Nico accelerated his vehicle up the mountain road. Matteo was already moving toward the chapel. Renato looked toward Alessandro. They found us. Who? The people who've been hunting Lucia for 30 years. Another shot rang out. Stone exploded from the chapel wall. Renato grabbed Alessandro's arm. We don't have time anymore. You have to find her. Where is she? Renato looked directly into his friend's eyes. Then he whispered 3 words. Lake Lucerne, Switzerland. Before Alessandro could ask anything else, headlights appeared on the winding road below. 3 black SUVs sped toward the chapel. Their destination was unmistakable. They weren't coming for Alessandro. They weren't coming for Renato. They were coming because someone had discovered that Lucia Moretti was still alive. The first black SUV skidded to a stop outside the abandoned chapel. Its doors flew open. Armed men rushed toward the stone building, using the trees and broken walls as cover. Before they could advance another step, Matteo Ferraro's voice echoed across the valley. Move! Former soldiers from Alessandro's private security unit emerged from the surrounding hillside. Matteo had ignored Alessandro's order to stay behind. For once, the Don was grateful. The exchange lasted less than 2 minutes. The attackers quickly realized they had lost the advantage. Their objective had never been a prolonged fight. It had been to delay Alessandro. One by one, they retreated to their vehicles and disappeared down the mountain road. Silence returned. Only the wind remained. Renato leaned against the chapel wall, breathing heavily. I'm sorry, he looked at Alessandro. For everything. Alessandro stared at the man who had been his closest friend for more than 40 years. You stole 30 years from me. Renato lowered his head. I know, but if I had brought Lucia back, they would have taken her again. I couldn't risk it. For a long moment, Alessandro said nothing. Finally, he placed a hand on Renato's shoulder. You should have trusted me. Tears filled Renato's eyes. I stopped trusting myself. There was no more time for regret. Within an hour, Alessandro's private jet was preparing for departure. Switzerland, Lake Lucerne. Every minute mattered. The attack at the chapel proved one thing. The Covenant had learned the truth. If Alessandro could find Lucia, so could they. Dawn broke over the Swiss Alps as the aircraft landed. Lake Lucerne shimmered beneath the morning sun. The address Renato had written led to a quiet village overlooking the water. Flower boxes decorated wooden balconies. Children walked to school. It looked like the kind of place where no one searched for the past. Perhaps that was exactly why Lucia had lived there for so many years. Nico stopped the vehicle outside a small lakeside bookstore. A modest sign hung above the entrance. Blue Lake Books. The front window displayed children's novels and travel guides. Nothing suggested the extraordinary story hidden inside. Alessandro stepped out slowly. For the first time in 30 years, he was afraid. Not of bullets, not of enemies, of a single question. Would she want to see him? The bell above the shop door chimed softly. A young boy looked up from a table covered with books. He couldn't have been older than 7. Dark hair, calm eyes. He smiled politely. Good morning. Can I help you? Before Alessandro could answer, a woman's voice came from the back of the shop. Marco. I'll be there in a second. She stepped into view carrying a box of books. Time stopped. The photograph had been real. She looked older, stronger. Her dark hair was tied back neatly. Around her wrist remained the faded blue ribbon. She looked at Alessandro with the polite curiosity reserved for strangers. Good morning. Are you looking for something? Alessandro couldn't speak. The words he had imagined saying for 3 decades disappeared. She frowned gently. Sir? Finally. He whispered one word. Lucia. The box slipped from her hands. Books scattered across the wooden floor. Her face turned pale. No one had called her that in almost 30 years. I think, she said quietly, you have the wrong person. Alessandro slowly removed the old family photograph from his jacket. The same photograph that had rested inside the glass case beneath his mansion. He placed it on the counter. You drew mountains beside the lake, he said softly. You hated spinach. You insisted your blue ribbon brought you good luck. You cried whenever thunderstorms frightened you. Tears slowly filled her eyes. Those weren't facts anyone could discover. They were memories. Her memories. She looked at the photograph, then at Alessandro. I remember. Her voice broke. I remember a man carrying me. I remember rain. I remember someone telling me that my father died saving me. She looked at him again. You, Alessandro nodded. I'm sorry. Those were the only words he could manage. I'm so sorry. Lucia covered her mouth as tears streamed down her face. For 30 years, both had mourned someone who was still alive. Slowly, she crossed the room. Neither spoke. Neither needed to. She embraced him. The years between them seemed to disappear. For the first time since Sophia's death, Alessandro allowed himself to cry. After a long silence, Lucia introduced the young boy. My son, she smiled through her tears. His name is Marco. Alessandro looked at the child. So, I'm a grandfather. The boy nodded proudly. I've always wanted one. Laughter broke through years of sorrow. It was quiet, gentle, real. Later that afternoon, Renato arrived in Switzerland under Matteo's protection. He stood outside the bookshop, uncertain whether he deserved to enter. Lucia walked toward him first. "You lied to me," she said. "Yes, you lied because you wanted me alive." Renato nodded silently. She hugged him. "Thank you." The old man broke down completely. For 30 years, he had carried guilt heavier than any punishment. Now, at last, he found forgiveness. That evening, Alessandro finally asked the question that had haunted him since the first envelope appeared. "Who sent them?" Lucia smiled. "I did." Everyone looked surprised. She opened an old wooden cabinet behind the bookstore counter. Inside lay dozens of cream-colored envelopes, blue ribbons, sheets of handwritten notes. "I started writing years ago," she explained. "I remembered pieces of my childhood little by little. I couldn't remember everything, but I remembered enough to know someone had stolen my past." She looked at Renato. "When he finally told me my father might still be alive, I wasn't ready to meet you, so I decided to help you find the truth first. The envelopes weren't meant to frighten you. They were meant to bring you here." Several weeks later, Don Alessandro Moretti returned to Italy, not alone. Lucia and her son accompanied him. The private room beneath the east wing of the mansion remained exactly as it had for 30 years. The glass display case still held the faded blue ribbon, the silver necklace, the old family photograph. Alessandro opened the case one final time. He carefully removed every item. Then he closed the lid forever. Some memories belong behind glass. Others deserve a second chance. As the family walked onto the terrace overlooking the Ligurian Sea, Lucia slipped her arm through her father's. The little boy ran ahead, laughing as seabirds circled above the cliffs. For the first time in decades, the mansion no longer felt like a fortress. It felt like a home. And on the desk inside Alessandro's study rested one final cream-colored envelope. This time, he smiled before opening it. Inside was a simple handwritten note from Lucia. "Welcome home, Dad." He folded the letter carefully and placed it in his pocket. Some envelopes bring fear. Others bring back a life you thought had been lost forever. For Don Alessandro Moretti, that single envelope had done both.